Listen up, because the story you're about to hear is the single most satisfying piece of property revenge we have ever covered. This isn't just about a petty fence dispute or a missing mailbox. This is the story of how one hyper-aggressive, power-mad HOA president tried to illegally seize a multi-million-dollar generational family ranch, only to have her entire organization, her reputation, and her personal fortune absolutely pulverized by the one person she should never have crossed, a federal land auditor. We're talking about fines that brought the HOA to its knees, criminal investigations, and a devastating, legally airtight maneuver that didn't just strip the president of her power, it banned her from ever setting foot on the property again. This is a complete and total $20 million victory over pure, unadulterated HOA evil. You need to see this. Stop what you're doing, drop that popcorn, and smash the like button right now. If you've ever dealt with a controlling neighbor, a power-tripping board member, or a single letter demanding you repaint your perfect house, this is your catharsis. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we're dropping the most explosive HOA drama on the internet. And trust us, you do not want to miss the shocking final image of this spectacular defeat. Let's dive in. The story begins with our protagonist. Let's call him Alex, who wasn't some new money suburbanite, but the fifth-generation owner of the sprawling Ironwood Ranch. This ranch wasn't a tract house with a picket fence. It was 300 acres of heritage land, predating the very idea of a modern subdivision. Alex himself was a quiet, unassuming man. But his professional life was anything but quiet. He was a high-level, meticulous federal land and resource auditor, a man whose entire career was dedicated to understanding the fine print of property law, zoning codes, and jurisdictional boundaries, a walking, talking legal landmine that the new management of the adjacent development, the Whispering Pines Preserve Homeowners Association, was about to step directly onto. The Ironwood Ranch had existed peacefully, separated by a nearly invisible 150-year-old wire fence from the original, smaller development for decades. The trouble began when the development expanded, and crucially, a new ruthless president, a woman we'll call Barbara, moved in and took charge. Barbara saw the ranch not as a historical landmark, but as a blight on her meticulously manicured vision of suburban utopia. Her first official salvo was pathetic, a truly minor skirmish. It started with a strongly worded letter, delivered by certified mail, citing aesthetic non-compliance regarding the color of Alex's historical barn. The barn was, and always had been, a deep, weathered iron oxide red. Barbara's letter demanded it be repainted to a board-approved, neutral earth tone, specifically Benjamin Moore's misty gray. The sheer audacity of dictating the color of a structure built in 1888, a structure that was arguably the most historically significant building in the entire county, was staggering. Alex initially treated it with the amused dismissal it deserved. He filed the letter under C for comedy and ignored it. But Barbara didn't back down. The letters escalated, moving from demands for repainting to demands that the entire fence line be replaced with an HOA-compliant, 4-foot vinyl barrier, arguing that the existing, antique wire fence was a visual hazard and a magnet for unseemly wildlife, which, in Alex's case, meant his actual working cattle. This was no longer just petty. It was a clear infringement on his ability to operate his business. The true problem, which Alex realized, was that Barbara, in her zeal to expand the HOA's perceived jurisdiction, had mistakenly, or perhaps deliberately, begun including parts of the ranch's boundary survey in her new ambitious development maps. The association's documents, which Alex eventually pulled, showed an astonishing quiet encroachment, suggesting that a 10-foot wide strip of his deeded land was now being claimed as HOA common green space. The minor conflict of a paint color and a fence was now officially a major land grab. Alex's first measured response was to send a one-page, professionally certified letter back to the HOA board, not to Barbara directly, simply stating that the Ironwood Ranch was not and had never been part of the Whispering Pines Preserve Homeowners Association, citing the original land grant documents, the county's official plat map, and the state-level agricultural zoning exemption that explicitly applied to the ranch. He politely requested that they cease all correspondence. He thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Barbara's response to facts and law was swift, aggressive, and incredibly stupid. The next day, Alex received a thick envelope. It wasn't another fine. It was an official-looking document titled Notice of Intent to Evict, Non-Payment of Fees and Violation of Association Covenants. The minor conflict had officially become a high-stakes, all-out war, ending on a chilling minor cliffhanger. Barbara, clearly deranged by power, was attempting to evict Alex from the ranch his family had owned for over a century, based on fees he never owed to an association he never belonged to. Alex stared at the document, his professional calm starting to crack, knowing he was dealing with someone who was not only wrong, but profoundly dangerous. The notice of intent to evict was, in the words of Alex's bewildered personal attorney, legally fantastical nonsense, a paper tiger designed purely to intimidate. But Barbara didn't stop there. She was convinced that Alex was simply a grumpy, misinformed farmer who needed to be strong-armed into compliance. She had no idea that she had just poked the sleeping giant of federal auditing. Her next move was an act of breathtaking criminal negligence. The following week, Alex awoke to the sound of heavy machinery. Not on his property, but directly bordering it. Barbara, acting on a unanimous HOA board vote, which later investigation proved was neither unanimous nor even properly recorded, had hired a contractor to begin work on the common green space. This meant, in reality, they were tearing down Alex's antique wire fence, which marked the legal boundary, and had begun staking out the construction of their HOA-compliant vinyl barrier 10 feet inside the Ironwood Ranch property line. When Alex confronted the workers, demanding to see their permits and property survey, they politely informed him they only answered to Ms. Barbara, the HOA president, and that the area was officially HOA land. Alex immediately called the county sheriff's department. The responding deputy, unfortunately, was familiar with Barbara, and while skeptical of her claims, was reluctant to get involved in a complex civil land dispute. He advised Alex to take it up with your lawyers and told the workers to simply stop active construction, but not to remove the stakes or the torn-out sections of Alex's fence, leaving a gaping physical wound in the property boundary. This was the outrageous, highly unfair action. The HOA had physically violated the deeded property of the ranch, essentially claiming 10 feet of it, and the law enforcement system was too slow and bureaucratic to immediately stop the injustice. Barbara felt utterly emboldened. The next day, she escalated again. She had a team of landscapers dump literal tons of decorative white gravel, the kind used in upscale subdivision entranceways, directly onto the ranch side of the disputed 10-foot strip, effectively and visually changing the landscape to fit her manicured vision. She then had 4 large, imposing, private property, Whispering Pines Preserve HOA-only signs installed, facing the heart of Alex's ranch, effectively making the ranch look like the trespasser. The final, disgusting act of this chapter, the one that broke Alex's professional reserve and turned this from a property dispute into a full-scale legal war, came 2 days later. Alex's cattle, relying on the old familiar fence line, wandered into the 10-foot HOA territory. Barbara, in a frantic phone call to the sheriff's office and a subsequent email blast to the entire HOA membership, demanded the cattle be immediately impounded and removed for violating the covenants and posing a safety hazard to her precious, newly laid white gravel. She cited a fictional nuisance fee of $500 per head per day. Alex arrived to find his cattle corralled by 2 bewildered deputies and a triumphant Barbara, who was filming the entire thing on her phone, narrating loudly about irresponsible landowners and the necessity of property compliance. The frustration was palpable, suffocating. Alex was helpless in the moment. He couldn't physically fight the deputies, and the legal gears were still turning too slowly. The immediate, terrifying injustice was that this woman was dictating the function of his actual ranch business from her position of fake authority. He paid the $1,500 initial fee under protest, a sickening moment of conceding to her petty tyranny, simply to get his animals back before she could arrange to have them hauled away. This was the major frustrating cliffhanger. Alex, a man who knew the law better than almost anyone, had just been legally robbed and physically encroached upon by an out-of-control HOA president, and all he could do was sign the check, seething, knowing that his professional life as a federal land auditor was about to come down on this woman like 1,000 tons of steel. That moment, the signing of the $1,500 check, was the turning point. Alex, the man, was humiliated. Alex, the federal land auditor, was activated. His calm returned, replaced by a terrifying surgical focus. He wasn't going to hire a lawyer to fight a civil case anymore. He was going to deploy his professional resources to conduct a comprehensive, federal-level audit of the Whispering Pines Preserve HOA and all associated legal entities. He took 3 days off work, telling his supervisor he needed to handle an urgent, complex jurisdictional review on a personal matter. This wasn't about the $2,500 or the fence. This was about the illegal seizure of property, the abuse of a legal entity, and what Alex now suspected was a massive cover-up in the HOA's financials regarding the expansion and land purchase, the very thing he audited for a living. The protagonist gathered his evidence with the precision of a Swiss clockmaker. First, the boundary survey. Using his professional-grade GPS and access to archived county records, Alex conducted a hyper-accurate federal-grade land survey, proving beyond any reasonable doubt that the 10-foot strip was unequivocally part of the Ironwood Ranch deed, a fact verifiable to the 10th of an inch. Second, the HOA's legal structure. Alex used his access to state corporate filings to pull the HOA's nonprofit registration, its bylaws, and its operating charter. He found immediate, devastating non-compliance issues. The HOA's supposed unanimous vote for the fence construction was never properly recorded in the minutes, which was a clear violation of state nonprofit law. Worse, the HOA board itself was improperly constituted, with 3 of the 5 members having non-resident ownership, which was explicitly forbidden by the bylaws. Third, the money. This was the climax. Alex reviewed the contractor invoices for the fence and the gravel. He cross-referenced the amounts with the HOA's operating budget and bank statements, which he obtained through a strategically worded, mandatory compliance legal subpoena that Barbara, in her arrogance, simply signed without consulting a real attorney. He found a $50,000 discrepancy, a gross overpayment to the contractor for the 10-foot strip of gravel and fencing. Digging deeper, Alex found a consulting fee paid to a shell company owned, indirectly by Barbara's husband, tied specifically to the Common Green Space Expansion Project. This was it. Embezzlement and fraud, explicitly tied to the illegal land grab. The fight back was a single devastating maneuver. Alex didn't send a letter. He filed 3 simultaneous actions. 1. A $1 million lawsuit against the HOA for trespass, conversion, and punitive damages for the illegal seizure of his land and the interference with his business. 2. A formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office, complete with his auditor's findings on the nonprofit's illegal operation, improperly constituted board, and bylaws violations. 3. The nuclear option. He submitted a package of documents, as a federal land auditor, to the county and state tax assessors, demonstrating that the 10-foot strip had been improperly assessed and taxed as HOA property for the past 2 years, based on Barbara's fraudulent documentation. The resolution was immediate and absolute. The State Attorney General's office instantly froze the HOA's operating funds and issued a cease and desist order against the board for operating illegally. The county tax assessor placed a massive lien on the common green space for back taxes and fraud penalties. The victory was total. The lawsuit was now a formality, as the HOA's legal entity was functionally destroyed, all because Barbara tried to steal a sliver of land from a man who audits land for the U.S. government. The fallout was spectacular. A perfect storm of legal and financial destruction. The HOA, crippled by the freeze on its funds, couldn't pay its legitimate bills, let alone fight Alex's lawsuit. The community, the victims of Barbara's self-serving reign, turned on her with brutal efficiency. The immediate consequence for Barbara was devastating. The State Attorney General's office, based on Alex's meticulously documented audit of the finances, opened a formal criminal investigation into the embezzlement and fraud concerning the contractor overpayment and her husband's shell company. She wasn't just losing a petty property dispute. She was facing potential jail time and massive personal financial ruin. The payback came in waves. Wave 1, public shaming and resignation. The county paper, picking up on the AG's investigation and Alex's massive $1 million lawsuit, ran a front-page story exposing the whole affair. Within 48 hours, every member of the HOA board, fearing personal liability and facing an immediate recall petition from the terrified community, resigned in disgrace. Barbara, after a tearful, embarrassing public meeting where she was effectively tarred and feathered by her neighbors, had no choice but to step down. The HOA was effectively rudderless, placed under temporary receivership by the state, forcing its remaining members to fork over massive special assessments to cover the burgeoning legal costs. Wave 2, the fines. Alex didn't just get his $2,500 nuisance fee back. The court, in an initial finding, levied massive fines directly against the HOA for the conversion and trespass, totaling over $100,000, money the association barely had. The ruling explicitly ordered the immediate removal of all white gravel, signs, and stakes, demanding the HOA pay for the professional restoration of the ranch's land to its original, unimproved state, which included rebuilding a section of the historical wire fence. This was sweet, immediate payback. The very aesthetics Barbara despised were legally mandated to be returned at her former organization's crippling expense. Wave 3, the personal liability. Alex had shrewdly named Barbara and her husband as individual defendants in the lawsuit, claiming personal liability due to their fraudulent actions outside the scope of the HOA's protective corporate structure. The evidence of embezzlement was overwhelming. Faced with the AG's criminal investigation and the certainty of losing the civil suit, Barbara and her husband settled immediately. They not only paid Alex a private, undisclosed sum, a sum that Alex's lawyer confirmed was more than enough to pay for all future ranch upkeep for the next decade, but they also had to legally stipulate, as part of the settlement, that they were personally responsible for the fraud. The satisfying payback was complete. The villain was stripped of her power, publicly shamed, financially ruined, and facing a criminal probe, all due to the lethal combination of Alex's professional expertise and his quiet determination for justice. The entire community now knew Alex wasn't just a rancher. He was the man who single-handedly brought down an illegal, corrupt HOA regime. The long-term aftermath was pure, concentrated satisfaction. The Whispering Pines Preserve HOA, now under court-appointed receivership and drowning in debt, was forced to implement sweeping fundamental changes to its governance just to survive. But Alex wasn't done. He was a professional auditor, and he understood how to apply the final surgical maneuver that would ensure his family and ranch would never be threatened by that toxic organization again. He used the findings from the state attorney general's investigation, specifically the documentation proving the improper initial surveying and permitting during the development's creation, a process that had been overseen by Barbara's cronies, to execute his final masterstroke. Alex petitioned the County Planning Commission, providing irrefutable, audited evidence that the entire development plat map was flawed due to the fraudulent misrepresentation of the common boundary with the Ironwood Ranch. The commission was forced to act on this federal-level documentation. The result was the secondary satisfying revenge move, a mandatory permanent replatting of the Whispering Pines Preserve development. The replatting didn't just affirm Alex's boundary, it required the entire development to physically adjust its common areas. The most significant element was a legally binding perpetual conservation easement on the 10 feet of land Barbara had tried to steal, forever sealing the boundary. The easement stipulated that the land must remain unimproved, native ranch land, and crucially, it established a no-contact buffer zone between the ranch and the HOA. The ultimate, final nail was hammered in with a new, state-mandated amendment to the HOA's new court-approved bylaws, which was required for the association to continue operating. The amendment, a product of the settlement and the AG's findings, explicitly stated that due to her documented history of fiduciary abuse and trespass against the adjoining property owner, Barbara, the former president, was permanently banned from holding any elected or appointed position within the HOA, serving on any committee or even setting foot on any of the common land she had once ruled. She was now simply a homeowner, surrounded by neighbors who had to pay thousands of dollars in special assessments because of her. She was legally silenced and confined to her own lot, watching her former kingdom crumble from behind her window, forever on the hook for any lingering criminal findings. While Alex's historical ranch stood pristine and untouchable, the Ironwood Ranch was officially and forever outside the petty tyranny of the HOA. Alex, the federal land auditor, had not just won a case. He had engineered a complete, legally binding, and devastating victory that would secure his family's land for generations to come. And the sweetest part of all was watching the HOA pay, again and again, for their folly. Tell us, what was the most shocking moment? Was it the federal land auditor reveal, the $50,000 embezzlement, or the total, permanent banishment of the Karen president? Let us know in the comments below. If this story of high-stakes revenge and total victory against a power-tripping HOA was your ultimate catharsis, smash that like button, subscribe for more devastating justice, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story of suburban warfare. Thank you for watching.